The letter arrived on the morning of my daughter's baby shower. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, actually hot this time, watching the early light come through the window above the sink. The kind of quiet Saturday morning I'd gotten used to over the past 2 years, living alone in this house that used to feel too small and now felt enormous. I had the radio on low. Some AM station playing old country. I wasn't really listening. The envelope was mixed in with the usual junk mail, but the return address stopped me cold. It was from a DNA testing laboratory in Raleigh. Not my doctor's office, not anything I had ordered. I set down my coffee and just stared at it for a moment. Then I opened it. Let me back up. My son-in-law's name is Clifford. He's 41 years old, a commercial real estate developer. The kind of man who shows up to a barbecue in a collared shirt and somehow makes it look natural. My daughter had been with him since she was 26. They married when she was 29. For years I thought he was a decent man, a little stiff, a little too interested in his own opinions, but decent. He treated my daughter well enough that I never had a reason to say otherwise. My wife passed 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in October, gone by February. After that, it was just me and my daughter, really. We'd always been close, but her mother's death made that closeness into something different. Something more deliberate. We called each other every Sunday. She came home for Thanksgiving, even when Clifford wanted to go to his family's place in Connecticut. She made sure I wasn't just disappearing into this house, so when she told me she was pregnant, I cried. I'm not ashamed to say that. I sat in this same kitchen and cried like I hadn't since the funeral. A grandchild. Something new to look forward to. My daughter laughed at me over the phone and told me to pull myself together. That was 7 months ago. Now let me tell you about the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a paternity test result, the kind you can order privately without going through a doctor. The sample collection date was listed as 6 weeks prior. The alleged father listed was Clifford. The result was listed as excluded. I read it 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time, because I thought I was misunderstanding the language. I wasn't. Clifford was not the biological father of my daughter's baby. I put the paper down on the table. I picked up my coffee. I set it back down without drinking it. I looked out the window at the yard. The oak tree my wife planted the year we moved in, the fence that needed repainting, the bird feeder I kept forgetting to fill. I thought, who sent this to me? There was no cover letter. No note. Just the result, and my name and address typed on the outside of the envelope. The return address for the lab was real. I looked it up on my phone right there at the table. They confirmed they send results by mail upon request. Someone had requested this result be mailed to me specifically. My first instinct was to call my daughter. I picked up my phone and pulled up her contact. Her face was her profile picture. A photo from a hike we took 2 summers ago, her laughing at something off camera. I stared at that photo for a long time. I put the phone down. I needed to think before I did anything. My daughter's baby shower was that afternoon. My sister-in-law, my late wife's younger sister, who'd become one of my closest friends after the funeral, had organized the whole thing at her house across town. There would be 30 women there. Pastel decorations, little sandwiches with the crusts cut off. My daughter had told me men didn't typically attend baby showers, and I'd told her I didn't care. I was coming anyway, and she'd rolled her eyes and said, "Fine, you can help park cars." I folded the paper and put it in the front pocket of my flannel shirt. I drove to the shower. I spent 2 hours parking cars and making small talk with women I barely knew, and watching my daughter move through the party, looking more radiant than I had seen her in years. She had her mother's way of making every person in a room feel like the only person in the room. She'd do a lap, laugh at someone's story, touch their arm, move on. She glowed. That's the only word for it. She glowed. Clifford wasn't there. Baby showers. He was home, presumably, doing whatever Clifford did on Saturday afternoons. I drove home after the party ended without saying anything. That night I sat in the kitchen again, with the paper on the table in front of me, and tried to think through what I actually knew versus what I was assuming. What I knew. Someone had sent me a DNA test result, indicating Clifford was not the father. I did not know who sent it. I did not know how the samples were collected. I did not know if the test was legitimate. I did not know if my daughter was aware of this test. I did not know anything about the circumstances that might have produced this result. What I was assuming, that the test was real, that it was accurate, that my daughter was hiding something, that Clifford either knew or didn't know, that someone wanted me specifically to know. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a high school history teacher. I know the difference between primary sources and conjecture. I know how easy it is to look at a piece of evidence and build a narrative around it that feels airtight and turns out to be completely wrong. So I waited. I did not call my daughter. I did not call my son-in-law. I did not call my sister-in-law, even though part of me wanted to, badly. I put the paper in the drawer of my nightstand and I went about my week. Tuesday evening, my son-in-law called me. That alone was unusual. Clifford called me on holidays and occasionally when my daughter made him. He wasn't a phone person. He preferred texting, short and informational. He asked if he could come by. I said yes. He showed up 40 minutes later in his gray BMW, wearing the same kind of collared shirt he always wore, this time with no jacket. He looked tired. He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the letter 3 days before, and he folded his hands in front of him, and he looked at me like a man about to make a business presentation he was not happy about. He told me he knew about the test. I didn't say anything. I waited. He said he had ordered it himself. 6 weeks ago, during his wife's second trimester, he had taken a hair sample from her brush and submitted it along with his own cheek swab to a private lab. He had the results mailed to his office, but then he'd changed his mind about what to do with the information, and in a moment he described as a lapse in judgment, he had requested a duplicate set of results mailed to me. He wanted me to know, he said. He thought I had a right to know. He didn't know what else to do with it. I looked at him for a long moment. I asked him why he hadn't just come to me directly instead of mailing an unmarked envelope. He said he was afraid of how I'd react. He said he thought if I found it on my own, I might be less likely to go straight to my daughter before he had a chance to explain. I asked him what he wanted to explain. He said he didn't know if he was going to stay in the marriage. He said that he had suspected for several months. Since around the time my daughter would have conceived, that she had been spending time with someone from her office. He said he had no proof of anything except the test result. He said he loved my daughter. He said he didn't know what he was doing sitting at my table. He said he just didn't want to be alone with this anymore. He was 41 years old, and he looked like someone had let the air out of him. I did not know what to feel. I want to be honest about that. Part of me wanted to throw him out of my house. Part of me felt genuinely sorry for him. Part of me, the part I'm least proud of, thought about my daughter upstairs in her old bedroom doing homework at age 14, completely unaware that any of this would one day be her life. I told him I needed time. He nodded. He got up. He thanked me for listening. He left. I sat at the table for a long time after that. The next morning I called my sister-in-law. Not to tell her about the letter, just to talk. She'd known my wife since they were girls. She had a way of saying true things without making them feel like weapons. She asked how I was doing, and I told her honestly that I was struggling with something and couldn't talk about it yet. She said that was fine. She said she'd noticed I seemed off at the shower. She said whenever I was ready, she was there. That's all she said. That was enough. By the end of that week, I had made a decision. I was not going to be the one to bring this to my daughter. Not because I was hiding something from her. But because I had thought it through carefully, the way I used to think through lessons before teaching them, and I had come to the conclusion that what I had was not information. It was one side of a story. A test result sent to me by a man who admitted he was confused, scared, and acting without a plan. That was not a foundation for blowing up my daughter's life. What I knew for certain was this. My daughter was 7 months pregnant. She was happy. Whatever the circumstances of this pregnancy, she was going to be a mother. I was going to be a grandfather, and the decisions that needed to be made in that marriage were between two adults who were not me. I called Clifford back. I told him I thought he needed to speak with my daughter directly. Not through me, not through a lawyer, not through a letter in the mail. He needed to sit across from her and say what he said to me. Whatever happened after that was between them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was afraid of what she would say. I told him that was fair. I told him being afraid of the truth was one of the most human things there was, but living around it, routing your whole life around this one thing you won't say out loud. I had watched people do that. I had seen what it cost them. It cost them everything, just slower. He said he understood. I don't know exactly what happened between them after that. I know that my daughter called me 9 days later, on a Sunday, which was our usual day. Her voice was different, not broken, not angry, quieter. She asked if she could come over. She sat at my kitchen table, this table, always this table, and she told me that she and Clifford had talked, that she had not been unfaithful to him, that there was a medical explanation she hadn't fully shared with him, something related to a procedure she'd had earlier in the year, a fertility treatment that had been more complicated than she let on, and that she had been afraid to tell him because she hadn't wanted to make him feel like their pregnancy was somehow lesser because of it. She said the man Clifford had suspected was her fertility specialist. She said she should have told Clifford from the beginning. She said she was sorry she hadn't. I asked her what the test result meant then, if the procedure had involved donor material. She said it meant exactly what it said. Clifford's DNA wasn't in that result. But the child was still theirs. They had both chosen this. She had just been the only one who knew. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked her if she and Clifford were going to be okay. She was quiet for a little while. Then she said she thought so. She said it was going to take time. She said Clifford was angry and he had a right to be, but that he had also told her he wasn't going anywhere. She said she believed him. I told her I was glad she came to tell me. She looked at me and said, "Did I already know?" I looked back at her and said it didn't matter anymore. She didn't push it. She knew me well enough not to. We sat there for a while after that, the two of us, in the quiet of a Sunday afternoon. I made fresh coffee. She drank half a cup, and then switched to water the way she'd been doing all pregnancy. The oak tree outside was just starting to show the first color of fall. I thought about my wife. I thought about how she would have handled this better than me. She always did. She had a gift for knowing when to speak and when to simply be present. I was still learning that at 63. My granddaughter was born on a Thursday in November. 6 pounds, 9 ounces. She had my daughter's mouth and Clifford's ears, and absolutely no resemblance to anyone I could place, which my sister-in-law said was always how it was at first. Clifford was in that delivery room. He cut the cord. He cried harder than my daughter did, which made my daughter laugh, which made her cry, which made the whole thing exactly as chaotic and overwhelmed as any birth probably should be. I sat in the waiting room with my sister-in-law, and we drank terrible hospital coffee from paper cups. Actually cold this time, no question about it. And she held my hand and neither of us said much when they brought me back. To see the baby, I stood at the edge of the room and looked at my daughter lying in that bed, holding this brand new person, and Clifford sitting in the chairs beside them, with one hand resting gently on the top of the baby's head, and I thought about the envelope on my kitchen table and the folded paper in my shirt pocket, and the long, strange weeks between then and now. I thought about all the things I hadn't said, all the conversations I'd almost had, all the moments I'd come right to the edge of making this worse. Sometimes the most important thing you do is what you don't do. My granddaughter looked up at the ceiling with the unfocused gaze of someone seeing light for the first time, which I suppose she was. She had no idea what a complicated welcome she had gotten into this world. No idea what storms had circled just outside the windows while she was still becoming herself. She didn't need to know. Not yet. I reached out and she wrapped her whole hand around my one finger the way newborns do, reflexive and absolute and completely without reservation. I held on.